More and more candidates have had one of their CFA exams canceled or rescheduled on them because of the continued global pandemic that we're seeing here in the later part of 2020, and that poses an extremely difficult situation. Because of the nature of the CFA exams and how much content there is and the way that you have to go about studying for that content, having a wrench thrown in your plans around the scheduling of what you studied and when you think you'll have to be tested on that material can be extremely discouraging, and I'm so grateful I didn't have to go through this in my CFA exam process. So I totally feel for anyone in that situation, but there are certainly a couple things that you can do in your studies and in your timeline to optimize the amount of information that you can store up in your brain before you do get to actually take that exam. Like I mentioned, many of the December 2020 exams have been canceled and candidates are having to reschedule. And I wouldn't be surprised if this becomes a trend throughout the next year, and hopefully not the next 2 or 3 years, but that is a possibility. So as a CFA exam candidate, you are going to have to become much more flexible than anyone who was taking the exams in a regular scenario had to be, because your exam could be moving its timeline on you. So I think the way you approach your studies is going to have to be fairly different from what someone like myself had to do. One idea might just be adjusting your location. Now, many exam candidates rent a hotel room the night before the exam in the city that they are sitting for the exam in, because maybe they had a 5-hour drive or something like that the night before, and they can't do that the morning of the exam just logistically. So if you are in a major city center, somewhere like Chicago, New York, or LA, we know many of the major city centers in India had canceled or rescheduled their CFA exams, then you have to be cognizant about that fact and know that there are going to be 1,000 or thousands other people in the exam room with you, which means I think it has a higher likelihood of being canceled because of the difficulties in maintaining social distance there. The CFA Institute has been more flexible about letting candidates pick their exam sites. So use that to your advantage if you have to. If you are going to be in one of those major city centers that I think has a higher likelihood of getting canceled, then maybe pick a location that is a few more hours away, but grab a hotel the night before and do it like other people have to do, where they, spend one night. Then you can wake up in your hotel room fresh, 6 a.m., 7 a.m., whatever, and start doing some of your formula memorization or just going over some practice questions before that exam. It gives you a higher chance of your exam not being canceled if you're in what I would consider more of like a secondary market exam site. But there still are going to be thousands and thousands of folks who need to reschedule an exam. So how do you best study for an exam when you don't know exactly when you're going to be taking that exam? It's certainly going to be a different approach, like I mentioned, than what I had to do. I think your primary focus is going to have to be staying fresh on various topics via practice problems. So that means you're going to have to approach how you take practice problems pretty differently. Let me explain what I mean by that by giving you an example. In regular years, someone could, in the final 3 weeks, say if they're a week in fixed income, economics, and ethics, they could take 1 week doing practice problems for fixed income, 1 week doing practice problems for ethics, and 1 week doing practice problems for economics. It's easier to section those off because you'll be going through the fixed income material for that whole week. So it makes those practice problems a little bit easier for you to be comfortable with when you're taking them, reviewing them, and ultimately kind of cementing them into your mind. And that structure works just fine when you know exactly when you have to have all that material in your brain by. But if that date gets pushed out by 3 months, it's not going to be very efficient for you to start studying the other topics that maybe you were more comfortable with, and then 2 months later have to go back to these 3 sections, whatever they might be, that you were less comfortable with, because when you go to start reviewing those again, most likely a lot of that information is going to have fallen off. My hypothesis is that an effective approach is going to be to do a handful of practice questions from each of the 10 sections on whatever your level is, and just use like 2 or 3 questions from each section. Put them all in a quiz. That'll make like a 20 or 30 question quiz. Hopefully, if you're using a test prep provider like Kaplan or Wiley, you can just build yourself a little practice quiz on their websites. I know you could with Wiley, which is what I used. And do these quizzes periodically throughout the month leading up to your rescheduled exam date. What this is going to do is help your mind stay fresh on the various types of questions that can come up across all 10 different topics of the exam. The goal here is not going to be to specifically learn the 2 or 3 types of questions that are coming up on each specific topic that you're using, because there are going to be thousands of potential questions for each topic. I'm not saying hopefully you get the 2 or 3 that do come up on the exam. I'm saying that the themes and concepts that apply to each one of the different topics in the CFA program are pretty well mirrored through different types of questions within each of those respective categories. So if you're worried about valuation of currencies in the derivative section, and you're doing this 2 to 3 question per book strategy that I mentioned here, and you end up getting at one of the derivatives questions as valuation of a swap. It's not the exact same question. It's not going to teach you how to do the valuation of the currency, which you very well may need to learn for your exam, but it is going to keep your brain familiar with the derivatives concepts. And then it's going to make you feel a lot more comfortable when in the actual final month before your rescheduled exam date, when you're doing a comprehensive review and you get back to some of those currency questions, at least you've done other similar types of questions from the derivatives chapter or derivatives book, so that it seems more familiar when you get back to it. Again, I'm saying just sprinkle little bits of each of the 10 books into practice quizzes that you're doing. Usually, I wouldn't have recommended this. Usually, I would have said, pound down fixed income. Once you're comfortable with fixed income, go to equity, then pound down equity. Once you're comfortable with equity, go to corporate finance, etc., etc. But since your schedule got pushed out and could potentially get pushed out again, you really just need to be sprinkling familiarity into your mind. It's going to help with your confidence. Like I said, you're not going to be memorizing. I mean, you might memorize these 2 or 3 questions that you do in these practice quizzes. I don't think that's the big differentiating factor here, though. It's just going to be that you're giving yourself exposure to a certain type of question from each of the 10 books based on whatever level that you're taking that year. And creating confidence in yourself is a pretty significant factor. I wouldn't say it's the most important or one of the most important factors, but it can make a difference if you get into your final 30-day review because you know that your exam is actually going to happen in August of 2021 or whenever it might be now, rather than having not seen a single econ question or ethics question for the past 3 months. You're going to at least have, again, sprinkled in some of those ideas and had your mind think in that type of way. Especially ethics is a good example there because it's a weird train of thought you have to be in to understand what kind of questions the Institute is asking in the ethics section. You're going to be more familiar with those concepts, and I think it's going to make you feel more confident and comfortable in taking those questions. And if you feel good in the last final 30-day review before when your rescheduled exam is going to be, you're going to study better and greatly increase your chances of passing the exam. It's worth noting here that there is a lot of overlap between level 1 to level 2 and level 2 to level 3. Certainly not enough where I would say, hey, if you just pass level 1, go take level 2, you'll be able to pass that. That is definitely not the case, but maybe 25 to 33% of the level 2 exam is overlap from the level 1 exam. So if you get your level 1 exam pushed out into some date in 2021 or 2022, and then you have the opportunity to take the level 2 exam just 6 months later, you're really not going to take a break from your studying schedule. So while that might not be ideal from a quality of life standpoint, I think it will help you be more familiar with the concepts that you're going to start going over for the next level exam. People who have done the level 1 exam on the December rotation in the past and then the level 2 exam on the regular June date will be familiar with this idea, so comment down below if you've used this strategy in the past and if it is actually helpful. I didn't do it myself, I'm just saying I think it would be helpful. Because typically when you go to take one, especially like the level 3 exam, you haven't taken another CFA exam in at least 1 year, and you probably took some months or 6 months off from studying, so you almost have to restart from fresh. Even though there is overlap from the prior year's level, you're not going to remember that material as well in your brain, so I think a complete refresh makes more sense then. But in this scenario, if you know you're going to be able to get in for a computer-based level 2 exam just 5 months or 6 months after level 1, that could be a bit of an advantage to you. You just have to jump right into the level 2 material, and you'll notice that a handful of it is reviewed from what you just finished in the level 1 exam. As discouraging as a rescheduled exam could be, please do not try to let it weigh on you too heavily. I say that knowing that for me, it would have been extremely difficult to not let this weigh on me because I was someone who was really particular about my study schedule, really particular about when I hit certain milestones that I wanted to hit, when I took my practice exams, and then of course when I sat for the real deal. And to have a wrench thrown in that schedule, maybe for some people it isn't as big of a deal. For myself, I just think it would have been so discouraging. As much as you can avoid that type of thinking is just going to be an improvement in your chances of passing your exam. You know, negative thinking in any light is never helpful, it's never progressive, it's never going to help you move forward to accomplish anything. So especially when you're studying for what I would consider to be one of the most difficult undertakings someone could ever do in life, you really need to do everything you can to be positive, keep the momentum going, do not miss a beat. Definitely don't take months off if you have an exam coming up in the next 6 months because you think, well, I could take 3 months off now and then since I was almost done studying anyway, the final 3 months will be enough. I think that's a horrible strategy. I think you're going to lose a lot of information over this period of time that you might take off. Then when you go to start studying again in the final 2 or 3 months, you might just feel way more behind, and that is going to weigh very heavily on you too and just make studying that much more of a dread. It's very important for you to find some way to flip this bad situation in your mind and try to become motivated by it. Either tell yourself you're getting more time to study, which is true, or that you're going to beat other people's strategy in rescheduling your studies, which if you follow some tips in this video, I think you might be able to do that as well. Because again, any negative thought is only going to bring down your chances of passing. If you're in this program to pass the exams, what you need to do now is very important. You need to make sure you're studying effectively still, but you also need to keep your mindset in the right place, stay positive, stay motivated, and keep up that grind. I'm pulling for you here. And I think if you do all these things right, you might get to the exam day and never know that it was all rescheduled and anything changed in your situation. You just have to stay focused and positive until then. This next point is not my recommended strategy, but if you are someone who was scoring 75% or more in mock exams already, and then your exam got rescheduled, you were well enough on your way to passing. So I think you actually could take it a little bit lightly over the next 2 to 3 months. Please don't think that is me saying that you can take a break. I don't want you to take a break. I want you to keep doing this sprinkling thing to get yourself a little bit of exposure to each of the topics in whatever level you're taking that year. At least every week, if not every day. You should be doing 1 or 2 questions from each topic every single day, even if you already were at like a 75%, 78, 80% scoring on practice exams. If you're someone who has an extremely busy schedule, I don't want to tell you to keep studying 3-4 hours a day every day for the next 6 months if you are already on your way to passing. So use your time really wisely towards other aspects of life right now. Just do not neglect your CFA studies. If you need to dumb down your whatever you're doing, 3 hours a day or 0 hours on weekdays but 10 hours on the weekends, if you want to go to just 25% of what you were doing previously, you can do that. Again, I'm only talking to people who are well on their way to already passing their level that they were about to take. You can do that as long as you are giving yourself a little bit of exposure to all those concepts, at least every week, hopefully every day, a little bit every day. It could be okay to put yourself into a little bit of cruise control as long as you're practicing a little bit to keep your mind fresh on these concepts for 2 or 3 months, and then hit it really hard just like you had been in the last 2 to 3 months before the exam, just as a regular full review process may have been. That could be the most efficient timeline for you if you're trying to maximize other things that are going on in your life as well. Closing remarks, my heart goes out to you. I'm so glad that I wasn't in this scenario when I took the exams. It would be very difficult, but do not get beat up on yourself. Do not feel like, woe is me. You need to do everything you can to stay positive. Follow some of the tips in this video. Study as much as you would have anyway, and I know that you guys can all do it. If you're at this part in the video, it means you watched the entire thing, and I really appreciate your support on the videos on the channel here. Leave a comment down below that just says something like, watch the whole thing. I'll give you a shout out, give you a like on that. I appreciate those types of things. It helps me in getting this channel going in the right direction. So as always, like I say in the closing of these things, thanks for watching.